It's another night of NBA playoff action on this Wednesday, May the 3rd. Two games on tap for tonight, both game twos. Should be a very interesting night of basketball. I'll be involved in both games. Let's go ahead and talk about them now. Why don't we start in Cleveland, where the Cavaliers host the Toronto Raptors. Cleveland, a 7.5-point favorite at Betsafe, 213.5 the total in this game. Cavs, of course, winning game one, 116-105, and it really wasn't as close as the final score would indicate. Was a total blowout. Cavs got out to a big lead in the first half, and Toronto really never made a game of it. I mean, I think they cut it to 7 at one point in the third quarter, but Cleveland quickly reestablished the double-digit lead and just cruised through the fourth quarter. Quicken Loans Arena quickly becoming a house of horrors now for the Toronto Raptors. Their last 4 playoff games in Cleveland, they have been blown out every single time. As a matter of fact, they've lost those 4 games, and that's game 1 of this series and the 3 games of the Eastern Conference Finals last year that they played in Cleveland. They've lost those 4 games by an average of 24.7 points per game, so the Raptors not even putting up a fight in that building. Now, the hope for them heading into this matchup this year was that they'd be better positioned to put up a fight with some of the new additions like Serge Ibaka, like P.J. Tucker. They're a little bit of a tougher team now. They have some more versatility, better defensively, but there was just no signs of that at all in game 1. Again, just a total rout, Cavs running away with it. It's beginning to be a sense now, I think, that Cleveland's really gaining momentum, really starting to play their best basketball at just the right time. But might I remind you, this Cleveland team was very inconsistent throughout the regular season, and even though they did sweep Indiana in round 1, they were by no means dominant in that series. As a matter of fact, all 4 of those games were decided by 5 points or fewer, and the Pacers, by no means an offensive juggernaut, they averaged nearly 109 points per game in the series. Cavs, of course, not a great defensive team. They allowed 107.2 points per game in the regular season. That ranked 20th in the NBA. So the Raptors will have some open shots here, and they'll have open shots throughout this series. They absolutely have to hit them. They need more production from Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, their all-star tandem of guards. Both guys played all right in game 1, but neither guy scored more than 20 points. I believe Lowry had 19 and DeRozan had 20, or vice versa. They need one of those guys to be up near 30. And look, they need big-time performances from both Lowry and DeRozan, especially on the offensive end, because you look at the rest of their lineup. I mean, I love P.J. Tucker, and I think he should get more minutes. And he played pretty well offensively in game 1, 13 points, 6 of 11 shooting, but not exactly a go-to offensive threat. Same could be said for Damari Carroll, the starting small forward. And even though Serge Ibaka can provide you some shooting from the outside at times, it's really Lowry and DeMar DeRozan. They drive the ship for this Toronto offense, and they need to come up big in this series if the Raptors are to have a chance. But as we said, the Cavs not a great defensive team, so Lowry and DeRozan should have a chance to do their thing. Now, look, I believe this game 2 is sort of a circle the wagons game for the Raptors. I know they say a series doesn't really start in the playoffs until a team loses at home. Well, you can rest assured this series has started. And based on what Toronto has done in Cleveland recently in the playoffs, based on the fact the Cavs beat them 3 out of 4 times in the regular season this year, you know LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers, they don't feel like the Raptors can beat them, and they might be right. I feel like this game 2, if the Raptors are going to have a chance of making this a series, they really need to steal this game 2. And I'm not sure if they're going to do it, but I do like them to put up a fight and make this a really competitive game. I do not think it's going to be another blowout. Remember, the Cavs haven't exactly been blowing a whole lot of people out lately. All 4 of those games in round 1, as we mentioned, decided by 5 points or fewer. So I think the last game, game 1 blowout of Toronto, was more of an outlier than anything. I think Raptors keep this one competitive, stay close. They might not be able to pull out the win, but I do like them plus 7.5 points. Moving on now to San Antonio, where the Spurs host the Houston Rockets in game 2 of their series. Spurs a 5-point favorite at Betsafe, 215 the total here. Game 1, quite a surprise as the Rockets went into San Antonio and really laid it on the Spurs, 126-99. Houston was up by 30 points at halftime. I don't know if you saw that game. Rockets made 12 threes in the first half, finished 22 of 50 from three-point range in the game. I mean, it was just an absolute laugher. James Harden set for the entire fourth quarter. And look, I know the Spurs are the Spurs, and I know the Rockets were not particularly consistent throughout the regular season. I know the Rockets are not a great defensive team. I know this game is in San Antonio, and the Spurs going to respond with a lot of professional pride here. I know that LaMarcus Aldridge is not only going to score 4 points again. All that being said, I may be falling. We talk a lot about in the playoffs, sometimes you fall into the lately trap. What have we seen lately? You see a game or 2 games and you see a team either play really well or a team look really bad, and you make some fixed judgments on what it's going to be like for the remainder of the series. And sometimes it's helpful to take a couple of steps back and just realize that in the NBA, sometimes a team has an off night, sometimes a team has a great night. That's why these are best of 7 series. All that being said, look, I know San Antonio is going to respond with an inspired performance here, but after seeing what we saw in Game 1 and after watching the Rockets throughout their Round 1 series against the Oklahoma City Thunder, I'm having a whole lot of trouble turning my nose up at Houston +5 in this situation. Heading into this series, the main question, or one of the main questions, was does San Antonio have enough in terms of perimeter defense to stem the tide, to slow down this Houston offensive juggernaut? Keep in mind, the Rockets second to only Golden State this year in terms of points scored. They are a great offensive team led by maybe the best offensive player in the game in James Harden. Harden with 20 points and 14 assists in Game 1. He was masterful. Well, look, if you were wondering whether or not the Spurs had enough perimeter defense to slow down these Rockets, we got an emphatic answer in Game 1. And I'm sure Greg Popovich is going to try to shake up the lineup, but there's only so much he can do. Yes, Kawhi Leonard is a great perimeter defender, but a lot of players on that Spurs roster who aren't particularly good one-on-one defense or defending the perimeter. Don't know if Popovich is going to try to go small, maybe pull Pau Gasol and David Lee for, sit them down for nearly the whole game. But there's not a whole lot of great defenders lurking on that San Antonio bench. It's not like you're going to bring in Manu Ginobili to shut down anybody. And the Rockets just keep coming at you in waves. As well as they played in Game 1, scoring 126 points, making 22 three-pointers, there's more where that came from. It's not like they maxed it out. Again, Harden with only 20 points, that's well below his average. He'll probably score twice that many a couple times in this series. Eric Gordon only with 11. Lewis Williams scored 13. Ryan Anderson with just 14. Nene with 7 off the bench. Now, all those guys played solid games with the exception of maybe Nene, who was eventually ejected. But all those guys are capable of scoring 25, 28, 30 points on their own. So it's not like the Rockets maxed out their explosiveness by any means in Game 1. Now, I do think they played about as well as they could play defensively, and I do expect the Spurs to top 99 points in Game 2. Kawhi Leonard just 5 of 14 shooting. It was very interesting. The Rockets trapping him on just about every screen, sending 2 guys at Kawhi Leonard. You could really tell they were approaching this Spurs team like Kawhi Leonard was the main focal point of their offense, which he is now. If you haven't seen the Spurs play a whole lot this season and you're still thinking of them as a team who's shares the ball, sort of known primarily for their passing, ball movement, finding the open man, they still do that. But make no mistake, it all revolves around Kawhi Leonard, and he's the straw that stirs the drink for this San Antonio offense right now. And again, he had a rough game in Game 1, only 5 for 14 from the floor. I expect a better performance from him in Game 2. I expect a better performance from LaMarcus Aldridge in Game 2. I think the Spurs are going to come out and play hard. I think they're going to play well. They're an extremely well-coached team, but I don't know if they're going to cover 5 points against this Houston Rockets team. I don't believe they're going to stop Houston from scoring. So I think Houston's going to be able to put up 110, 115, maybe 125 again like they did in Game 1. And I think they very well could win this Game 2. If not, this could be a very close game that comes right down to it. So I think Houston +5, a good-looking bet here in Game 2. Going against the public on that one, Spurs, a popular public bet at the time of this recording. But going against the public, a lot of times a wise move. You know what they say, when the guy to the left of you and the guy to the right of you like the same team, you're supposed to like the other team. That's what we're doing here is Game 2, going with Houston +5. There you have it, folks. Those are my thoughts on this Wednesday, May the 3rd. I like the Toronto Raptors +7.5 on the road in Cleveland. And I like the Houston Rockets +5 in San Antonio. I wish you best of luck tonight, no matter what you decide to do, just so long as your interests don't conflict with my interests. Enjoy the games, folks.